Right now, I'm going to promise you that this will be the best tight end video on the 2025 class that you will watch all year. And you guys might know by now that we have the FSC prospect models for running backs, for wide receivers, which you can access by heading to our website, which is down below in the pinned comment. But I've spent the last few weeks building the tight end model, and I think this is particularly relevant in 2025 because we have a pretty solid group of guys at this position. The ultimate goal with our rookie picks at any position is to hit on them, right? We want to get the guys that produce good fantasy production and maybe fade the guys that don't, and hopefully draft them in the right order as well, because we don't want to draft the guy that stunk over the guy that was elite. Before I say anything else about this video, don't be that joker who goes to the comments and say that I spent 10 minutes yapping on process and I didn't get to the goods. Skip ahead if you guys do not care about the process, but I just built this thing. I spent dozens of hours on it, and I'm explaining this for transparency purposes and to explain to you guys how I actually went about this. So there are timestamps down below if you just care about the 2025 tight ends to target and avoid. Just like I did with the running backs and wide receivers, though, we can measure a hit in Dynasty one of two ways, either by raw point production. Obviously, we want productive fantasy assets. And I chose to go for the first 4 years, so year 1 to 4 PPR points per game, because tight ends generally take a little bit longer to develop than wide receivers and running backs. So I stretched this beyond years 1 to 3. And number 2, in their peak keep trade cut dynasty value is the other way to kind of value these guys, because the best example of this is Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts has not really hit from a real-life NFL fantasy production standpoint. However, he locked down to the tight end 1 in Dynasty for a long, long time. So in theory, you had a very valuable tight end on your roster, even if he didn't produce like one. Hitting on picks in Dynasty isn't always about fantasy production, because if you hit on Kyle Pitts in 2021, nothing was stopping you from selling him at peak value for Mark Andrews plus, or for George Kittle plus, or for Travis Kelce plus, or for 3 first-round picks, or whatever you could have gotten for him at the time, if all you cared about was production and you didn't actually believe in Pitts. So the model is accurate. It produced an R squared, or in simple terms, for those of you guys that are not math people, kind of correlation or accuracy of 0.4106 to PPR points per game, 0.5668 to predicting peak dynasty value. This was 12.3% higher than draft capital. So, this guy was drafted in the second round. I'm going to draft him in my rookie draft because of that. And 7.5% higher for his peak keep trade cut value. Overall, I would say the NFL is pretty decent at valuing the tight end position and evaluating tight ends properly. So the disparity between the model and draft capital is actually smaller than it was for running backs and wide receivers. But keep in mind, we only have peak keep trade cut value for tight ends in the 2024 class to the 2016 class, going back in the model. And we only actually have point production value since 2021, because the 2022, 2023, and 2024 classes have not played 4 years yet. So I did not include them. And if you think about it, those are the best tight end classes of the last couple of years. Brock Bowers last year, Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, all those guys that scored really, really highly in the model are not included PPR points per game wise, because they're only entering like year 2, year 3, and year 4. So that is the basic rundown of how the model was predictive. Here's a brief rundown of how it actually works. And again, if you only care about the tight ends in this class, feel free to skip forward. These are the model inputs. Athleticism, known to be very important for the position, so it weights higher for tight ends than it does for, say, wide receivers. In-game efficiency marks, conversely, were less correlated. So things like yards after catch per reception and, blocking numbers and all that kind of stuff. All of it was balancing the scale to get the best results. And I tested these markers mercilessly to properly weight them to the point that they are at today. From there, you kind of filter out the hits in this group. And when you filter out the hits, so let's say you want to find what made George Kittle a hit, what made Mark Andrews a hit, you do that, filter out all the guys that hit, and you make trend lines and grade all the prospects on them. For example, the career yards per route run, very common metric for wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs, who posted a top 10 season at the tight end position was 1.87. The career yards per route run for someone who posted a top 6 peak keep trade cut value, ergo they were really valuable tight end in Dynasty, was 2.16. So between those two numbers, you kind of use them to make a bell curve in the grading to use that to grade tight ends going forward. Generally, around the 70th percentile grade range is a pass-fail, and then you would get the full 4%, which was the amount allocated for yards per route run in the model, by being well over that total of 2.5 yards per route run in your career or higher. So to demonstrate how the model works, I'm going to show you the two kings of the model, the two guys that graded the highest, which are Brock Bowers and Kyle Pitts, the only generational tight end prospects we've seen since 2016 as their grades are over 90%. Their grades go across the board as follows. You guys can see career yards per route run, best season yards per route run, targets per route run, best season yards per team pass attempt, reception market share per game, weighted dominator rating, all of these things. Again, if you're wondering why the percentages that they have, I tested them, which ones were the most predictive, kind of weighted the percentages based on that. Those were their market share stats. Then you look at efficiency stuff like first downs per route run, PPR points per game, yards per reception. Then you got age stuff. How good were they years 1 to 3 of their college career? Age on draft night, year out of high school, Power 5 conferences, their strength of schedule. All that stuff factored into their analytics grade, as did the multipliers and diminishers that I had in the wide receiver and running back model, which is, did they improve after their breakout season? Did they continue to get better as their college career went along? What kind of quarterback play did they have? If they had a first-round quarterback or a second-round quarterback or a third or a fourth-round quarterback, that would obviously make their job easier, so they lost points for that. You see Bowers and Pitts obviously played with some decent quarterbacks in college, so their numbers go down in that area. And then target competition. Did they have real NFL competition on the field with them? For Brock Bowers, he was competing for targets with Ladd McConkey, Adonai Mitchell, George Pickens at periods of time, and other tight ends that were drafted high. So he gets 2% there. Kyle Pitts had Kadarius Toney competing for targets with, who was a first-round receiver. So he gets 2% there. Those were all the analytic markers, including those 3 bonuses to help you contextualize some of those factors. Then you get into the traits portion of it. Athletically, you get all the final traits that we look for: 40 times speed score, relative athletic score, weight, all that kind of stuff. I also added a bonus called the prototype bonus, where I looked at the top tight ends in fantasy football rankings, where what range of height were they? What range of weight were they? What kind of 40s were they running? Speed scores, relative athletic scores. And if you hit every single one of those markers, then you got labeled a prototype, and both Bowers and Pitts fit the bill for it. Then you get into some of the other trait stuff: yards after catch ability, blocking, deep usage, hands, and all that kind of stuff. This is the in-game metrics that they would have scored on as prospects. And you might be wondering why blocking is only worth 4%, because, tight ends need to know how to block, right, to get on the field. Well, the answer was this. Number one, we don't really have great blocking metrics to measure college tight ends. It's not really, reliable to just go off of PFF grades, which is what I'm doing in this. But some guys rank better in PFF grades because they were slot receivers and they were blocking DBs versus guys who were ranked as inline tight ends who were trying to block edge rushers. So it kind of convolutes the numbers to the point that it didn't end up really being that predictive. The other thing, too, is I originally had blocking worth 8%, but it actually didn't prove to be correlated because a lot of tight ends are drafted because they're good blockers. So it kind of muddied up what tight ends were actually being drafted for. And of course, yes, we want a receiving tight end to be a good enough blocker to be on the field consistently, but we also don't want him to be inline blocking all the time, because then he's probably just a blocking tight end, not scoring us fantasy points. And then you get into the film category where you have draft capital, PFF grade, my film grades if I graded them coming out, NFL.com's film grades if I did not grade them coming out, so it was one or the other. And then you also have the consensus big board, which I added both to the running back, wide receiver models recently, and I put in the tight end model because the consensus big board of PFF's big board and NFL mock draft database dates back to 2016, and it's also an additional piece of film because sometimes the NFL draft media is higher on players than the actual NFL draft is, and that actually proved to be predictive. It spotted guys like George Kittle, for example, who PFF and NFL mock database was much higher on than he actually got drafted, and that improved the model's hit rate, so I decided to include it. And you guys might see that generational tier on Bowers and Pitts. Each tier is fantasy themed, just like it was for wide receiver and running back. Here are the hit rates for those tiers and their expected year 1 to 4 PPR points per game and their expected keep trade cut value. You can see those generational guys expected for 12.02 PPR points per game years 1 to 4. Top 5 upside, tight end 1 upside, streamer, waiver wire, and fodder are the name of the tiers. And same goes for the keep trade cut values, like I said. Similar to the running back and wide receiver model also is the rookie draft tier based on draft capital. And essentially what this is the tier of prospects that you saw on Bowers and Pitts is a bucket they fall under by having a 90% grade or higher. The rookie draft tier is a kind of like, should you target them, should you not target them, canned advice spitter, where based on where they went in the NFL draft, you can see there's 5 first-round tight ends here: Bowers, Hawkinson, Njoku, O.J. Howard, and Hayden Hurst, each of them with different labels. And the reason for that is based on their FSC grade at the end, where they went in the NFL draft. They were all first-round picks. Should you be targeting, fading them, avoiding them, whatever? Because some of these guys, because they were first-round picks, generally dynasty players will draft based on draft capital, will go higher than others based on where they were drafted. So you can see Bowers as a generational guy, you would need a Godfather offer in order to not draft a guy like Brock Bowers. TJ Hawkinson, a smash pick based on where he's going to go in rookie drafts. David Njoku, more of a solid bet right down the middle. This is where he should have been drafted. O.J. Howard, the model seems to indicate that it was a little bit of a reach by the NFL to take O.J. Howard as high as they did. And then Hayden Hurst, a major reach on the NFL's decision to take him in the first round. So that's kind of how the model works. That's how all these labels work as well. Let's go round by round and analyze some of the tight end prospects in the 2025 class. Now, if you guys skipped ahead to this point, I'm going to compare their prospect profiles to other prospects that we've seen. The key to contextualizing these comparisons is not necessarily was that prospect a hit or not. It's more so where were they going in rookie drafts? What kind of bet were we making on them? And also thinking kind of why didn't they hit or why did they hit? Because some guys don't hit because, it had nothing to do with their prospect profile. They're just like dumbasses and they don't work hard enough or whatever. So think about in relation to these prospects, where were they going in rookie drafts and that kind of stuff. So tight end 1 in the model, drum roll, was not Tyler Warren, was not Colston Loveland. Tight end 1 in the model is Bowling Green's Harold Fannin Jr. in the tight end 1 upside tier. Hit rate wise, we're talking an 86% chance at a tight end 1 season production wise, 60% chance for a top 6 tight end season production wise. Every single one of these tight ends in this tier peaked as a tight end 1 in Dynasty at some point, and 40% of them peaked as a top 5 tight end in Dynasty at some point. His analytics grade is absolutely God tier. 33.75% is the 3rd best in the history of the model since 2016. Only Brock Bowers and Kyle Pitts had higher totals. His closest comp in terms of the model is probably Evan Ingram, but Evan Ingram ran a lot faster than Harold Fannin. So I also kind of like Dalton Kincaid as a half-decent comp for Harold Fannin. He is a true unicorn prospect. When you talk about this player, it's not just a tight end who beat up on small school competition, because there's plenty of tight ends every single year. I think Adam Troutman, for example, is a good example of this. Guy who went to like Dayton, had a lot of production because he was the only good player, NFL caliber prospect on a small school. This isn't just a small school tight end who cooked. He fried college football and produced like nobody we've ever seen. Here are the things that Harold Fannin is not just good at, was 100th percentile in the model, meaning he was the best tight end we've seen since 2016. 96.1 PFF receiving grade, best in the model. 2.99 yards per route run for his career, best in the model. 3.76 in his best season, best in the model. 3.7 yards per team pass attempt. You get the picture. 48.2% reception market share, 58.5% weighted dominator rating, 26.5 PPR points per game in his best season, also best in the model. His 32.37% years 1 to 3 receiving yards market share, meaning his first year out of high school, second year out of high school, third year out of high school, is 7% higher than any tight end in this model. And if you threw him in the wide receiver model, would be top 15 in that metric. He is a freak show of a producer, even despite 84th overall projected draft capital, because people have issues with his film and his fit and how his NFL projection works. He is going to be high on your draft board. I promise you, Harold Fannin is one of the best bets we've seen from a small school tight end prospect, and the model indicates he is actually easily the best bet we've seen from a small school tight end prospect. And think about right now, we have a small school tight end prospect as the current tight end 2 in Dynasty with Trey McBride. I get the shaky projection and the usage, but the dude is an absolute animal. And again, he actually rates as the number 1 tight end in this prospect model, despite Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, and a number of other guys being well ahead of him for most NFL draft scouts. Now, let's get into the top 2 tight ends, because these dudes are going to be the ones that you have to spend high capital on. Tyler Warren is a good prospect, fellas, but he is a tad overrated. It would have really helped him to test like a freak show. But unfortunately, he didn't test at the NFL Combine or his pro day. Some good comps here for sure. Mark Andrews, I think, is a really good one. Size-wise, looks like one of the better comps. Same goes for a guy like Tucker Kraft and a guy like Pat Freiermuth. All these guys are good tight ends. Slightly better, more prototype, size profile, with that big body, power forward kind of usage that we saw from Tyler Warren in college at Penn State. Tucker Kraft is more of a freak athlete type, so he probably doesn't totally fit the prototype for Tyler Warren versus, Andrews or Pat Freiermuth, I think are probably more in line athletically with how Tyler Warren would have tested had he tested at the Combine. If we gave him, Google AI says he runs a 4.68, let's say we give him that, and an 8 RAS score, he'd be right there with Harold Fannin at the top, but he is still, unfortunately, tight end 2, unless he really blew up the Combine, had like a 9.5 RAS score and ran like a 4.61, which I just don't think he would have done. But alas, he didn't test, so we can't include his tight end testing of any kind, and he is unfortunately tight end 2 in the model, not tight end 1 in the model, with some decent comps. Again, had he tested, he would have been more in the Hunter Henry, Sam Laporta, Michael Mayer range, but Warren's profile is all film. It's less analytics. The reason he is being drafted is because NFL draft scouts love his film, which is fine. Not testing, though, is a problem for Tyler Warren because it ends up hurting him. And it is a bigger problem for my tight end 1 in the class on film, Colston Loveland, who's all analytics and less traits and less film. But he is still expected to be drafted very high, so NFL draft scouts love his film as well. Loveland is ranked just behind Warren, so the comps are pretty similar. But Loveland profiles a lot closer to Sam Laporta, Hunter Henry, Tucker Kraft, and Michael Mayer because he's more analytically driven than some of those other guys. You might be wondering why his traits are so bad, a 9.8% final traits grade. It's because, and any Michigan fan will tell you this, his yards after catch numbers, his downfield stuff, a lot of that was hindered by some shitty quarterback play, and he absolutely got killed by not testing because he doesn't get any credit for testing numbers. So had he tested at the Combine, he would have been much better in the prospect model, but he also had some poor blocking stuff, which is also his fault. And similar to Tyler Warren, let's say he had mediocre testing numbers, a 4.70 40 time, 8 RAS score, and now his grade elevates to 73.25%. He would actually be the tight end 1 in this class had he tested in the model, and it's higher than Harold Fannin's. That's if he tested average, and I actually do think it's a possibility that he could have tested really well, and he would have jumped into the top 5 upside tier with comps like Dallas Goedert and TJ Hawkinson had he ran, say, a 4.65 and had a 9.0 RAS score or higher. He would have been in the tier with Hawkinson, with Goddard, with Njoku, with some of these other guys. So those are the big 3 per the model, and yes, Harold Fannin ranks number 1 as of now, but again, the top 2 guys didn't test, even though they're projected to be first rounders and Harold Fannin is expected to be a third rounder versus those guys. I would say the big takeaway here is that maybe Warren's a little bit overrated and 100% Harold Fannin needs to be on your draft board, because I get he's landing spot dependent, needs a creative offensive coordinator and all that kind of stuff. But man, if he gets it, he could be an absolute star at the next level. Let's move into the streamer tier. Tight end 1 production about 24% of the time. Tight end 1 value about 27% of the time. Big drop down from the tight end 1 upside hit rates like I talked about, where you're getting much, much better type of production out of these guys versus the streamer territory. So in the streamer territory, the first guy that we have on deck is Oronde Gadsden from Syracuse, who is currently my tight end 5 in the class on film. He's tight end 4 in the model, but he's my tight end 5 in the class on film because I really like what Harold Fannin and what the next guy are capable of doing. The great production, the solid traits, but he is expected to go on day 3. Right now, he is expected 176th overall draft capital. So his comps are similar to like Brevin Jordan, Isaiah Likely, Harrison Bryant, and Jatavian Sanders. Again, Oronde Gadsden is going to be on a lot of my fantasy teams because I think he is one of the best 3rd-round picks that you can make, or 4th-round picks that you can make in rookie drafts. But unfortunately, the NFL just doesn't seem to agree. His film grade is not good. Even being elevated by my film grade of him, he has a 9.5% film grade versus his final traits grade, 22%, and his analytics grade, 28%, more on par with the guys in the tier above him. It's just that we need to get this guy better draft capital. So again, I'm doing this pre-draft. We're doing this with projected draft capital. We don't actually know where he's going to go yet. But if he goes like 73rd overall, that would be huge for Oronde Gadsden's fantasy production. The next guy in this tier is Mason Taylor of LSU. Same tier, but a totally opposite profile. The opposite of Oronde Gadsden in that he is expected to get great draft capital, which of course is great news because draft capital is the biggest input, the most predictive input of fantasy production. He is my tight end 3 in the class on film, tight end 5 in the model. I would say Mason Taylor profiles to be a very, very solid bet in the range that you're going to get him, which is probably the early to mid 3rd round, I would imagine, of rookie drafts. The NFL draft community loves him. He has bad analytics, but I can only give him so much of a break for the fact that he played with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. He obviously got that 2% target competition bonus, but he also played with Jaden Daniels, so it kind of offsetted his target competition bonus a little bit. So he is kind of comparable to like a Gerald Everett prospect, a Hayden Hurst prospect, a Tyler Higbee prospect, who are more film guys, specifically Hurst and Everett, than they were analytics guys. But again, Mason Taylor had a really valid excuse, unlike Gerald Everett and Hayden Hurst, that he was trying to produce alongside 2 of the best young receivers now in the NFL with Malik Neighbors and with Brian Thomas Jr. So keep that in mind with Mason Taylor. I actually really, really like his profile and is going to be a big target of mine. You just have to apply that context to his profile that he played with those guys. Next, we get into the final guy of the streamer tier, which is Terrance Ferguson, who burst onto the scene at the Combine, tested really, really well, and did hit that prototype bonus that you saw in the RAS score and the athletic traits when I was going over it. Only Mason Taylor and Terrance Ferguson actually hit that prototype bonus. It's simple. The best tight ends in fantasy, as I explained already, are between 6'3" and 6'6", way more than like 240 pounds because they have to be on the field blocking sometimes, but way less than like 265 because we don't want them to be basically only blocking tight ends. They run 40s faster than 4.70. Their speed scores about 105 or higher, and their RAS scores above 7.5. Only Mason Taylor and Terrance Ferguson of the tight ends that matter in this class actually hit this. And again, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren probably would have hit this had they tested, but they did not test at the NFL Combine because Gadsden and Fannin did not quite hit this because they're a little undersized and didn't run quite fast enough to hit the speed score mark. But back to Ferguson. Terrance Ferguson of Oregon has some really good comps. You see George Kittle there. That's going to light up anybody. Albert O, last year's tight end 2, Ben Sinnott, definitely one of the tight ends to target in this rookie draft cycle. Did have some traits that are not good, didn't have great hands, things of that nature. But when you play with the University of Oregon, you also have high target competition as well. And the fact that he had a pretty solid analytics mark of 18.75 while on the same field as Tez Johnson, as Troy Franklin, as Evan Stewart, who transferred there this year and will probably be a highly rated receiver in next year's class. So keep that all in mind with Terrance Ferguson. But he's a really good target of mine. 3rd, 4th round of rookie draft, definitely going to be on my draft board. Into the waiver wire tier. Now, waiver wire tier, big drop off as well. Only a 12% chance that you're going to get a tight end 1 season. Only a 9% chance that you're going to get a tight end 1 on the open market in terms of their keep trade cut value and a 2.39 expected PPR points per game. So anybody in this tier that you thought was, a really good target is probably not one. And Elijah Arroyo from Miami is the biggest example of this because he's being hyped up as potentially a top 5 tight end in this class, or maybe even the tight end 3 or 4 in this class. But he appears to be Luke Musgrave all over again, which is the NFL's high on him for some reason. Again, I think he's a good athlete. I think he's good after the catch. But outside of that, I wasn't really impressed with his film. I thought he was overrated on film, and he is definitely overrated in the numbers. Let me repeat the hit rates of this tier. 12% chance of tight end 1 production. Never has a tight end from this tier ever peaked as a top 5 tight end on the market. So I will be fading Elijah Arroyo. Welcome to the avoid section of the tight ends to target and avoid in the 2025 class. Elijah Arroyo is one of them. Moving in to Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame. There's definitely some late round gems that he comps to favorably, like a Jake Ferguson or a Grant Calcaterra, even a Tyler Conklin here. I would say he'd be a better option depending on what his draft capital is, because right now he's projected to go 161st in the NFL draft. But if Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame sneaks into the 3rd round, he will rank probably into the streamer tier. So definitely feel pretty good about him. But as of now, he's probably a fade given the draft capital. Then we have Jalen Conyers of Texas Tech and Benjamin Urosek from Georgia. Both kind of mid, but still technically in this tier. The biggest takeaway here is that none of these guys are really going to be that great of projections. So as much as Elijah Arroyo is the one getting the hype from this tier, The model suggests that he's a similar prospect to Benjamin Urosek, Jalen Conyers, and Mitchell Evans. So that should kind of just go to show you that he might be a little bit overrated in the eyes of the NFL. And remember, his projected draft capital of 60th overall and the consensus big boards being high on him is factored into his grade. So it's not like it's just excluding the fact that he's good on film or good on film according to the metrics. I didn't really like his film. I don't really find a pro-style tight end when I watch Elijah Arroyo. I see a guy who got a lot of manufactured looks and also, by the way, played with the first overall pick in the draft, Cam Ward. So Elijah Arroyo probably going to be off my draft board, and I'm going to let my league mates draft him. Biggest takeaway in the fodder tier, and again, this is not where you want to be. You do not want to be in this fodder tier. The only hit from this tier in the history of the model is Dalton Schultz, and only had, a top 12 season and 2 top 12 seasons in point per game. It's not like he smashed. I get that Gunnar Helm from Texas hurt his ankle on the 40, but he still had shitty analytics and probably will have bad capital as well. So Gunnar Helm is getting some hype from the University of Texas. As a Texas fan, I can tell you he had okay film, but he is not in good company here. And then you also have Jake Brinningstool from Clemson, CJ Dupre from Alabama, who actually qualifies as a prototype athletically, but never produced and is expected to go undrafted. Again, CJ Dupre from Alabama, if he goes drafted and he gets like a 4th or a 5th round capital, he'll be an interesting option, but probably not super interesting. Joshua Simon from South Carolina, semi-interesting if he actually gets drafted. And then you have Thomas Fedone of Nebraska, Bryson Nesbitt of UNC, and Luke Lachey, famously of Iowa, who produces a lot of tight ends, but he doesn't look like a good one. All of these guys, not very good options. Again, if you like them, they're probably going to go undrafted in rookie drafts. So you want to stash them on your taxi squad, go nuts. But there's a good chance that none of them will be really, really relevant guys, including Gunnar Helm, who is actually getting some hype of this group. That's the tight end class. Here it is. Total tight end class. You see we got 3 tight end, 1 upside prospects, 3 streamer prospects, 4 waiver wire prospects, and a bunch of fodder guys. The closest tight end class that we've seen to this class in 2025, because I'd like to give you guys a historical comp for what we're looking at here, is the 2017 tight end class, where we had David Njoku, Evan Ingram, and O.J. Howard as the big 3. You guys can kind of maybe match make them if you want to. Evan Ingram, kind of the Harold Fannin style. David Njoku, more of the Colston Loveland style. O.J. Howard, more maybe of the Tyler Warren style. We had 2 major sleepers on day 3 and day 2 who were streamer prospects, which was Gerald Everett and George Kittle. Of course, George Kittle absolutely crushed. So keep in mind, Gadsden, Mason Taylor, Terrance Ferguson came from that tier. And then you also have a bunch of waiver wire guys that maybe are interesting. Jake Butt, Jonnu Smith, kind of the Elijah Arroyo, Gunnar Helm of this class, and so on and so forth. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this deep dive into the tight end class. Again, there was a lot of information that I had to go through, so this was a little bit of a longer video. If you guys want more in-depth looks on Warren, on Loveland, on those type of guys, the top tight ends do have write-ups and grades in our draft guide, which you can get down below in the link in the description. The tight end prospects page has not been updated on the class, but you guys will be able to finick and tinker around with this information at the very least in the next couple of weeks, but by definite for sure by the time your rookie drafts come along. So if you guys want to use the wide receiver, running back, and tight end prospect models, head on over to flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up. The running back and wide receiver ones are going through a major update either today, tomorrow, or early next week. I can't remember exactly what the devs told me, but you will be able to tinker with all that stuff, and the tight end model will be coming very soon as well. Like I said, the goal of this was to find highly productive players based on historical data. Solve the equation of, okay, so these tight ends were really good in fantasy. Let's reverse engineer what they did well in college to find future stars. And some people, heavy data nerds, will call that overfitting. But again, it's a guide, it's a roadmap. Tell us historical comps and kind of bucket these prospects into the type of prospects that they are. I'm not claiming that this will never miss. It's just a good way to focus on ranges of outcomes and give realistic comps for these players. I would say generally a takeaway from this video is that Tyler Warren's a bit overrated, Harold Fannin and Colston Loveland a bit underrated, Oronde Gadsden, Mason Taylor, Terrance Ferguson look like the round 3 and 4 targets that you guys want to go after, whereas Elijah Arroyo and Gunnar Helm look like fades, and then anyone else you like, they'll probably go undrafted, so maybe pick them up if you're interested. So that's kind of the long and short of it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. But with that being said, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.